Hi, y'all. My name's Jennifer Huddleston Kelly, and I am an alcoholic. I've been kept sober since December 5th of 92, and that's my miracle. And the Legacy Group in Plano, Texas is my home group. And it's an honor and privilege to be here. Y'all are awesome. Y'all show a girl a good time. I'm just saying. For those of you in the back, I just want to remind you that the camera adds 150 pounds. And it's my story. Thank you. I want to thank you so much for inviting me here. I want to thank everybody on the committee who had anything to do with this, because the people who put in the meetings and the get-togethers and the make the corsages and get the name tags and all that kind of stuff, we get to show up. We get to show up and sit in God's lap. And that's what it feels like for me. It's how it felt at my very first meeting. Oh, I'm getting squishy already. It's happening. I mean, I knew I was going to cry. I just didn't know when. It just felt like when I walked into that meeting that there was just this sort of, okay, she's here, let's start. That's how it felt. And for those people who put in the time so that we could walk in and get that feeling of, okay, they're here, we can start. I want you to know how deeply and profoundly I appreciate it. Because God shows up at these things. It's easy to give a good talk at something like this because y'all are ready to hear a good talk. And that's amazing. And let me tell you, I've never had an easier job because I've heard the other speakers, and they did an amazing job. And if you missed it, sucks to be you, man. No, really, you guys brought the heat. So I don't have any cleanup to do at all. I can just completely speak gibberish, and I may. And y'all have already heard a message of depth and weight. It was truly, those were profound talks, and I will be handing out those CDs like prescriptions. Don't y'all do that? Like, I got one for you now. It is such a gift to get to be here, and I want to thank. I thank y'all. I want to thank. I got a chauffeur and a hostess. Man, this is such a deal. I was just coming here to get out of jail. You know, they didn't tell me I was going to get staff. I do not have staff. Don't let my sponsor hear me say that. That's bad. But I've had a truly great weekend already, and what I'm supposed to tell you is what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now, in a general way. And I'm just telling you right now, not so much in a general way. My name's Jennifer, and I'm an oversharer, and I give what I call as the Dr. Pepper can talk. You just shake it up and see what squirts out. We're all gonna hear it at the same time, so I don't know exactly what I'm going to share. I have some general ideas, but there's always that thing that comes flying out, and I go, whoa. But I hope that somewhere in it you're going to hear what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like now, and that there is a power greater than myself that I met in these rooms with you people that has changed me profoundly from the inside out. And if you don't hear that, then I've really screwed up. As a matter of fact, just in case. On page 55 in We Agnostics, actually we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or another it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith of some kind of God was a part of our makeup just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. I was born at a very early age on November 16th of 1966. For you Revelations fans, my birth date is 111666. Just saying, Tom and Charlotte should have buckled up. I was born to a football coach and an English teacher, and they were kind and loving and precious people, and they were so straight, so incredibly straight. They were just, I mean, like my mom's still around, but still straight. They went to work and they went to church and they did the right thing even when nobody was looking. You know, like my parents met and they got married. They met and they dated and they got married and they had sex, like in that order. And they got married on purpose. They stayed married on purpose. I mean, like a few years ago, my mom got a call from her tax guy, and apparently he had messed up on some math, and she had underpaid her taxes. And you know what she did? Like, she just wrote a check right away, sent it off to him. I said, Mom, make them catch you. I mean, come on now. And that would never cross her mind. That would never cross her mind. And I was happy and healthy and well-adjusted for almost 3 years. We have pictures. And then they brought home the resentment. I got a little melon-headed sister, and she ruined everything. My first drug of choice was attention, and I still haven't recovered from it. And she interfered with my attention, and I wanted her sent back to wherever it was she came from. And on any given Thanksgiving, I still wage a campaign. She ruined any chance that I might have to blame my alcoholism on my upbringing, because we went to the same schools, we went to the same church, we were potty trained in the same way. We turned out a little different. She went to high school and graduated, and then she went to college, graduated in 4 years. Who does that? I mean, what a freaking show off. I'm 52 and I'm a sophomore, so I'm pacing myself. Actually, I'm pretty sure college algebra won. But after my sister got out of college, she chose a career. She went to work for Jesus in Bulgaria. My sister was a missionary. I was a cocktail waitress in a pool hall. So we were both doing God's work in our own way. Outreach to the poor and downtrodden. And while my sister was in Bulgaria, she met a Bulgarian man. They met, they dated, they got married and had sex. In that order, because that's the way you're supposed to do it. I married Big Daddy 9 years ago, and I was not a virgin. So one of these things just doesn't belong here. And for the new people in the room, I'm going to talk about people and places and situations, and it's real easy to hear these stories and try and identify, and that is why she's alcoholic. And I just want you to know that these people and places and situations are just props that I drank at. But I truly believe that you could have taken little baby Jennifer and dropped her into any family, anywhere on the planet Earth, and if she found her some fermented fruit juice, you were going to have you an alcoholic. I absolutely believe that, because my alcoholism is rooted firmly in my reaction to alcohol, and not anything else. Good day, bad day, doesn't really matter day. Auntie Jen's going to do a little drinking. And And I can't imagine why you wouldn't. I mean, that's just how I'm wired, and it doesn't have much to do with anything on the outside of me. At one point, I was going to drug and alcohol counseling, which is so funny because it never occurred to me that meant they thought I had a drug and alcohol problem. I didn't even quit drinking. I kind of missed that we weren't supposed to drink while going to drug and alcohol counseling. I missed a lot. But they made us do this assignment where we wrote about our triggers. That's a fun one. I'm like, oh, okay. Music. Tuesdays. Wednesdays, Thursday, Friday. Air. Water. I mean, and I could not, I thought that was the dumbest assignment ever, like way over my head these little assignments were, because I was so busy swimming in alcohol, I couldn't even imagine that alcohol was my problem. I really couldn't. I couldn't fathom life. And that's just not where I came from. I came from these people who were total and complete teetotalers, who found purpose and direction in their work and in their church, and who didn't just tell me about that, they showed me that. But I was born with a twitch, I'm like this really big chihuahua. I'm just sort of intense and twitchy, and always feeling like I'm really supposed to be somewhere else. Still today, I need meetings. I need these 12 principles, or I'm walking around Kroger talking outside, out loud, to the voice in my head, going, I'll tell you what I'll tell her the next time I see her. My spiritual fitness is still sort of dictated by whether I can have the radio on or whether we got to turn it off. Got things to talk to the dashboard about. And so early in my life, I treated my spiritual malady with attention. And I have always been somebody who lives from the outside in. And so if you told me I was wonderful for about 3 seconds, and then I needed somebody else to tell me I was wonderful. And so I liked going to school because there's a lot of attention to get there. And if you're not getting it for being good, be bad. They'll pay attention to you then. And I love church because there's even more attention there. If you sing loud and are willing to pray, you're good. They will definitely let you do as much as you're willing to. And so I decided when I grew up I wanted to be a minister. Lots of attention and robes that hide your figure. So, but I have this, I like boys. I like boys a lot. I totally I don't care what you heard. There was a flannel face, but I really like boys. And I scare the fish. I hit puberty in about 3rd grade. So I discovered boys in about the 4th grade, and they discovered me in 2009. So 2007, sorry, I exaggerate. And so my story begins with a boy. I wanted one real bad, and I couldn't seem to keep him. Apparently, this whole no boundaries and oversharing is not hot. And so I was at the First Methodist Church, and in he walked. And I wanted what he had, and I was willing to go to almost any lengths to get it. He didn't know who I was, so that was a good start. He was preppy back when preppy was the thing to be. He was tanned, he was toned, he was coiffed, he had a waist. I have always wanted a waist. I would have had a very different story if I had had a waist. And he found me fascinating, too. We hated the same people. We were disillusioned by the same things. He taught me how to improve my shoplifting skills. We had a future. And we began to date. And long before I ever had a drink, I had me some Alkalogic. And I liked that boy, and I wanted to keep him. And so I decided that he had to deflower me. Because I knew that if you had sex, you got to get married. And what could go wrong with this plan? So I decide that my virginity is what's holding me back. Now, I don't tell him about this plan because I've noticed when you tell a guy a plan, he immediately starts changing the plan. And so we're out on a date. I'm actually driving the car that night, and it had been a particularly nice evening. We had scored some stuff at the mall, and the moon was full, and there's probably some Lionel Richie or REO Speedwagon playing, and that's when I decided to make my big move. It's also when he decided to tell me he was gay, so a pattern begins. And I did not handle the news well. I am so self-centered, I acted like he was gay at me, you know? And by the way, this was the 80s. It was not a real fun time to be gay. And my reaction was not only self-centered, but it was unkind. And this was not something where he was waving a rainbow flag or anything. His heart was breaking, and he was terrified about the reaction that he would get. And I was not. As a matter of fact, I spent the next 2 years trying to convince him he wasn't that gay. And he is, like I checked. And I know I digress, but I also want to tell you that he's also a sober member of Alcoholics Anonymous. When I was about 10 years sober, he was living in Atlanta and I was living in Dallas. We had not talked since the prom. And he called me up and he wanted to meet me for dinner. And I didn't want to go. I mean, I go through thinner times and fatter times, and this was an especially fat time. And I could only think of two reasons that he would call me. One would be that he was really ill, and the other would be that he needed a baby. And I was kind of freaked out by both those ideas. And but I got on my knees and I prayed and I told God that if I needed to go, he needed to make me, and he did. And I showed up for dinner, and my friend said, I don't know why I called you. I just, for some reason, it seemed like I needed to call you. And within about 10 minutes of our conversation, I knew why he called. And I got to 12-stepping. And a year and a half later, I flew to Atlanta, Georgia to talk at his first AA birthday. And about a year and a half ago, I was speaking in Atlanta, and he drove 45 minutes across town to see me. And we picked up right where we left off, not because we had such a bond in 1980 whatever, but because we speak the language of the heart of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm so thankful that people taught me how to do the work so that I had a message of depth and weight when he called me. So that I had a picture of what Alcoholics Anonymous is that was attractive enough for him to be curious. And I thank you for that. But first, I got to get drunk. So, you like that? I'm big on segues. Boink! Okay, so, keeping y'all from nodding off. So, I had become really curious about drinking. I grew up in the mean streets of Plano. There are no mean streets in Plano. There are a bunch of Starbucks and nail salons. And my friends had started drinking in middle school. But middle school drinking is not that attractive. It involves, like, getting grounded forever and nose puking. And neither of those seemed really good to me. And so I put it off for a while. I really didn't see how alcohol had anything to offer me. But as I got a little bit older, I started hanging out with an older crowd, which seems to be a common thread amongst alcoholics. We like to tell ourselves it's because we were so mature. I now know it's because I have a radar for finding the most immature person in any room. And so I was hanging out with these nerds from church. And these nerds from church were in a little singing group. They needed one more alto, and I was available. So I sang in their little nerd singing group, and then on Wednesday nights after the practice, they go to Chili's and they drink frozen margaritas. And I watched this transformation take place while they drank these frozen margaritas. Like, the nerds got cooler. Like, they're drinking and my perception changes. That's how I know I'm an alcoholic. Because I'm like, he's just gotten cuter. as he drank. Like, now he's funny, and he's telling dirty jokes, and he's being wildly inappropriate. Who knew? And so I became really interested in alcohol, watching the nerds drink. And because Google didn't exist, I'm a big researcher. I had to ask questions. So I picked this friend of mine, and I was, how much does this cost? Where do you get it? How do you get it? What does it feel like? What does it taste like? And I mean, every time I saw her, I had 5 new questions about drinking. And to shut me up, she gave me 2 bottles of wine and said, for the love of God, go try it. And so I drove around with these 2 bottles of wine in the back of my dad's car for a couple of weeks until the perfect night. Yeah, it's aged. And it's delightful. 105 degrees on wine that has never seen a grape. Nummy. So anyway, it's the night before a church trip, and me and Susie are spending the night at Yolanda's house. Now, Susie is a drill teamy girl. Yay! She is so precious. She has big D's and a small this and giant blonde hair. Whoosh. And Susie can just do the splits for no reason. Yay! I don't know if you can tell. I've had to do a little writing on girls like Susie. Because it seemed to me like girls like Susie could say, I'm cold. And people would leap over furniture, changing the thermostat and grabbing blankets. Jennifer, chop wood. Susie's cold. Sure. I want you to know that Susie was a dear friend to me then, and she is a dear friend of mine now. She is one of the kindest women I have ever met in my entire life, and yet I've got these 2 feelings. I've got this one where it's the Susie that I know who is amazing and loving and would give anybody anything they needed. She's just that kind of girl. And there's this other part of me that is so envious of the life I imagine that she gets to live. And there's already this war going on in me. And all I know is I want to be better at drinking than Susie. Drinking was a competitive sport from the get-go for me, and I'm just going to say it. 26 years sober, I still drink better than Susie. Oh, 2 Bear Susie is worthless. I mean, she's worthless at drinking, which is why she gets to be home with her husband tonight. But anyway, Yolanda was off fighting with her boyfriend on the phone. I got the 2 bottles of wine out of the car, and me and Susie, we started out as closet drinkers. We sat on the floor of a closet, and we drank a bottle of Boone's Farm Tickle Pink and a bottle of Real Sangria. Now, if you ask Susie about that night, she's going to tell you the most negative story ever. She is going to talk about blood and broken glass and bile, and I'm sure those things happened, but it's really about perspective, people. Because if you ask me what happened, there was this transformation. And everything that made me less than her fell off as I drank that wine. Now, I remember how it tasted. It tasted like nail polish remover. Anything that your body immediately tries to eject. Not good, you know? So I got to mush it down as it's burning out my nasal cavities, you know? Because I know I'm going to puke. I'm just not going to puke before Susie. And after a certain point, it didn't bounce up. And, you know, after a certain point, I got that, oh, yeah. And drinking taught me the spiritual significance of whatever. You know, it didn't make me tall or willowy or blonde. It just allowed me to breathe in and out all the way down and be okay in my own skin. I love the line in the 12 and 12 that talks about wearing the world as a loose garment. That's what alcohol did for me. I mean, my garments got so loose they fell off. But eventually. But I loved the way that felt. I mean, I loved the way that felt. And it felt like I could compete with anybody, anywhere, anytime if I had that in me. And we were in a 2-story house drinking in that closet, and I learned some stuff about drinking that night. I learned when you're in a 2-story house in the closet, while you're drinking, the house turns into a ship. And I'm not talking a cruise liner. It was like a pirate ship, because I was standing flat-footed and lost my balance and smashed my face into the back of the closet door, and that is when the magic of alcohol began to work for me. Because I'm intense and sensitive and intensely sensitive. I feel everything. I feel changes in barometric pressure, and it feels like it's about me. And all of a sudden, not only do I not have to feel my emotions, I don't have to feel my face. Thank you very much. I would like a lifetime membership to this. This is delightful. Now, that next morning was a little different story. I don't know if you remember this, but during the night, it felt like my tongue had grown hair. Like I woke up and I had never been that thirsty. And I drank a couple of gallons of water from the bathtub because Susie was puking in the sink. And we went downstairs, and we were at Yolanda's house, so her mother had made huevos rancheros for breakfast, and you know what's coming next. Yolanda's mother was unprepared for that, but I puked again, and then I got on a bus to sing for Jesus, and I was both of those things, and I loved both of those things. I loved how it felt to be a part of the God Squad, but I also loved how it felt to be sneaking off into that parking lot with the boys and the beers and the Marlboros. And for a little while during my story, there was a tug-of-war, but alcohol won. You see, alcohol is so powerful, I don't even have to put it in my body to feel the effects. Alcohol is so powerful that all I have to do is think about drinking, and I can breathe. It's just going to be okay. And unfortunately, church just didn't do that for me. It wore off pretty quickly, and my twitch would come back, and I couldn't recall that connection that I had felt just a few hours before. That wasn't their problem, it was mine. That's where my drinking began. I went to jail before I even got out of high school because I'm an overachiever like that. Me and the gay boyfriend stole a street sign. We were not master criminals. As a matter of fact, I drive past street signs every day. Never do I think we should put that in the car. But apparently on 12 California coolers, dude, we need a sign. So we put it in the back of my dad's car, and for those of you who don't know, those signs are reflective. They are not hard to spot, and yet I kind of forgot it was back there. So we see the lights coming on. My gay boyfriend starts crying because he's peed in a park and he thinks it's a felony. I have no clue why we're getting pulled over. And that's when they explained to us about the street signs. So we went to jail on a Class B misdemeanor theft over $30, and it took me 3 years of sobriety to figure out that was alcohol related. I'm sitting on one side of the cell block, and he's sitting on the other, and I'm doing that real pretty crying, and you know, for those of you who haven't been there, it echoes. And he says the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and by the way, I've been in AA 26 years. I've heard some dumb stuff. This guy says, "Tell your mom and dad it's my fault." You can bet on that, buddy. You do not have to tell me to blame you. Check. I am so grateful for the inventory in Alcoholics Anonymous that showed me quite clearly that he had neither the brains nor the maracas to come up with this genius plan. This had Jennifer written all over it. But I am certain that when my parents bailed me out of jail, I said, "He threatened to kill me if we didn't steal that sign. I didn't want it." I only tell you that story to tell you this one. I was a little fritzed out from my prison experience, but I had to get ready for church. So I wound up with a curling iron burn all the way across my forehead, which began to blister as the morning went on, so I'm looking kind of like Cro-Magnon. And that morning, I was the youth speaker at the First Methodist Church. I got to speak in front of 3 services fresh out of jail. And, oh, it's funny now. I can't prove it, but I'm pretty sure that's the day I stopped looking the world in the eye. And an important part of my message is that had nothing to do with them. Those people loved me, and they carried a message of love and hope to me, and they would carry the message of love and hope to me tomorrow if I was there. What was different was me. What was different was me. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt I would drink again, no matter what the consequences were. I knew I would drink again because it did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And so I just stopped hanging out at God's house. I thought that would fix it. You know, if you can't be good, be bad. And so I went off to college with a decision to be bad. And I kind of suck at that too. But anyway, I went towards college. You've heard how well that went. I took a test that said I was going to do real good. That test assumed some things, like I'd show up, and I wouldn't make a boyfriend in about 24 hours. I met this guy, my first night of legal drinking, I met this guy. He was the one, man. Well, his friends called him Humongous, which I found fascinating, and I still don't know why, but he had long hair and a long beard, and he didn't like shoes, and Humongous had some stuff going for him. He had no job and no car. I like guys with no job and no car. For some of y'all, that might go on the downside, but men wander off on me. So I found if you date a man with no job and no car, and that's alka dating, we all know, when you come back later, he's still there, you know? Or he's easy to track because he's on foot and he looks like Sasquatch. And so I met this guy, and we got drunk and fell into weird. By the end of the night, we put his bicycle in the back of my car, and we headed off to the commune. And then it really got weird. He liked to do drugs. I was just saying no. I'd say yes later, but I was saying no then. And he and his friends like to trip on acid. And I got to say, those guys plan in advance. We could learn some stuff from them. Like, they would do all this stuff before they did the drugs. You know, they would synchronize the sundial and build the bonfire and hire the band and whatever else. They do all that stuff before. They had a plan. Then they get messed up. I really admired that. I've noticed us. We get messed up, and then we go, you know what we need? We need a plan. Alcoholics like making a plan with no equipment. So I became the chaperone for their acid trips, and I didn't know that was related to my alcoholism. You know, they would go off and wait for the mothership to come, and I would sit by the bonfire and drink beer the way I like to drink beer. You know, and when you're dating guys who are doing that kind of stuff, they don't interfere with your drinking. These are not the kind of guys who are going to say, Jennifer, we're really concerned about your drinking. They're off playing a tambourine or whatever it is they do. And without even realizing it, I am organizing my life around making my choices to make sure that nothing gets between me and the next drink. Because anything, and I do mean anything, that comes between me and the next drink is disposable. And that's where the progression of my alcoholism begins. Anything. Jobs, no jobs, men, no men, utilities, no utilities, my family, my friends, my opportunities. It's all disposable if it comes between me and my next drink. And I'm not even necessarily working off of facts. That's the thing. I tell you I'm going to tell my story. But the longer I stay sober, the more I know I've got stories that have nothing to do with what really happened. I write my own stories up here. And they may or may not have anything to do with reality, but they're what I believed and they're what I acted and reacted upon. And so what I'm telling you is my perception of what was going on. And gradually things got worse. I flunked out of school, surprise. And I made my big geographic. I moved one zip code away. I'm not brave. I drove over a bridge in a lake, and it's a whole new world. And I ain't going to California. I just went to this country town, and I looked around my first night there, and everybody was wearing boots. And I said, I'm going to be Patsy Cline. And so I ran off, and I got me sat down in a girl's chair, and I said, tweeze me up some cowgirl hair. And I started talking like Reba McEntire. It was so embarrassing. And this was the 80s. Everybody was getting perms. Men, women, dogs, children, chickens. There are bald men in this room had a perm. So I'm getting my perm, and within the third perm rod, this girl who's doing my hair says, you drink, don't you? I said, I do. I'm not super self-aware. I did not know that beer comes out your pores. She did not have to read my aura to know that. And she offered me a beer, and we got drunk and did my hair. And this is going to turn out exactly as bad as you think it is. By the time we were done with the first 12-pack, she was done with the perm. And I had a shrubbery sitting on top of my head. You can't tell it right now, but I got a lot of hairs. And especially based on the ones she burned off, it was really sticking out hard. We are both feeling no pain, and that's when she grabs the scissors. Wait for it. By the time she gets done, I have an asymmetric haircut. That means I have short hair on one side and long hair on the other. She twirls me around in the chair. I see 3 heads, and we all got bad hair. She is drunk as Cooter Brown, and she is bobbing and weaving, and she says, nobody in town has this haircut. And I said, nobody in town wants this haircut. But then she said the magic word. She said, you want to go honky-tonkin'? And I did. I went off to this place with a big orange horse. I bought myself some hot pink ropers and a belt buckle the size of my head, and that night we were honky-tonkin'. By the end of the night, Papa was twirling me, and everything was just going to be magical. We went to a bar called the Moonlighter, and it was a magical wonderland. The dress code was toothless and tattooed. And I had no tats in all my teeth. I was the hillbilly homecoming queen. And the men in that bar treated me special. They said, sit on my lap and I'll buy you a burr. And I did. And I thought I had arrived. And gradually things got worse. I started collecting DWIs. It's a hobby of mine. The first time I just thought it was what happened to girls, like, party girls. I kind of think, like alcoholic women, we should have patches like the Girl Scouts, And like if you ever went to bed with a guy and you woke up in the morning, he had 1 fewer limbs than you remember him having the night before. You get your prosthesis patch. And I'm glad to hear I'm not alone. So I just figured I got my DWI patch and went to see an attorney, and he said, look, Jennifer, when you get pulled over again, here's what I want you to do. And I thought, why would I do that? I've already got my 1 patch. Why would I get 2? My attorney really didn't understand that I had a plan. It's an ALCA plan, but it's a plan nonetheless. My plan is, be careful. You want to see an Alan on Twitch? Tell him your be careful plan. They immediately see the flaw in this plan. See, I drink a substance, so I don't have to care about nothing. I drink the no-care juice, and then my plan is I'm going to care more. There's only one problem with that plan. It doesn't work. Less than 6 months later, I pulled over on another DWI. Who knew? Got an attorney and a psychic. And that's when I decided I got to change my game plan up. I got me a home bar. Picked a bar right next to my place of living so that I could just stagger home. And it seemed like a good plan, except that wherever I go, there I am, and I bring alcoholism with me, and I have no idea that's what's killing me. I can tell you that I drink too much too often, but I don't know that that's alcoholism. I don't know that what I am doing is driven by something I have absolutely no control over. And I can't remember that I had said, when this stops being fun, I'll stop doing it. It had never occurred to me that I couldn't. until one day I found out I couldn't. And then we had to change up the story, and that's what I do. I just change up the story. I'm the girl who sleeps with you and then says, well, I must be in love. We got naked, and I change up the story to meet whatever it is that I'm doing. And gradually things get worse. I'm engaged 7 times but never married. And when I say engaged, I mean, alcoholic women sort of have a sliding scale of relationships, somehow tied to the purchase of toothbrushes. And I'm not saying anybody really came with the hardware or anything. If you were half drunk and said, what we ought to do, yes, it counts, let's do it. And I learned calligraphy so I could fill out invitations to a wedding that ain't never going to happen. But I have jobs and no jobs, and I keep flip-flopping between being a preschool teacher and a bartender. I mean, they're basically the same job. It's just the refreshments are better in one place than they are in the other. And by the end of my drinking, I live in a violent and abusive home. There's cursing and there's hitting and there's all forms of degradation. And I'm screaming, get out, and he's leaving. And then I'm chasing him. Oh, wait a minute. When I say I lived in an abusive home, when I say there was physical violence, it's pretty important that I tell you that was me. That was me. You see, I came into Alcoholics Anonymous a victim, and I'm so grateful for the women in AA who told the truth about themselves so that I can tell the truth about mine. Because if I had stayed the victim, you would have a different speaker. He did hit me, but it's pretty important for me to tell you about the 30 minutes before he hit me. He had been asleep. Me and the evil sock puppets, we had been up. I don't call it the committee, because that sounds like they're acting in an official capacity. I call them the evil sock puppets. And we were all up discussing the condition of our relationship, and then we'd wake him up to get him in on the combo, and eventually I'd wind up having him pinned against the wall with my fingernails in his chest, twisting and screaming, you want to hit me, don't you? And if you say it long enough and loud enough, they will take directions. I'd throw all his clothes out and then chase him around the block and then tell him to get back in there, and he'd go, and I'd pick up the clothes and put them on up so we could play the game again tomorrow. Because I got a head like an Etch-a-Sketch. You shake it twice and there's nothing there. I've got a head like an Etch-a-Sketch. You shake it twice. And I've forgotten the suffering and the humiliation of a week or a month ago. I am without defense against the first drink, and I don't know it's the first drink that's killing me. On November 19th of 1992, I've moved back home with my parents. I'm still drinking in a town 3 counties away, because that's where my car went automatically after work. And every night I was driving back through 3 counties trying to get home in a drunken haze. And that night, I had already had 2, so that night I was pulled over on a felony DWI, and the only thing that was different that night was that I told the truth. It was weird. Like, I remember distinctly going, what did you just do? What? I've been a liar a lot. I am an accomplished liar. And all of a sudden, he says, how much have you had to drink? And I say, $67 worth? I mean, who does that? So we cut a deal. I said, hey, guess what? You know I'm drunk, and I know I'm drunk. How about we do the pen thing, and you just take me to jail? And he said, that sounds like a great idea. And I was his most agreeable customer that night. And I sat in a jail cell, and I had a moment of clarity. It's always a pretty good place to have one. And my moment of clarity was simply that I could no longer tell the story of what's a nice girl like me doing in a place like this. My moment of grace was knowing exactly what I was, exactly where I was, and exactly why I was there. There was no big misunderstanding. I was getting DWIs, not because of my driving, which had been a conclusion I had come to earlier. I have a driving problem. That's why I moved next door to my favorite bar. Problem solved. But I get DWIs because I drink. I have not had one DWI since I stopped drinking. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, I went to jail, but it wasn't for DWIs, so that's progress. So anyway, sitting in that jail cell, honestly, I could see who I was. And I knew at the core of my being that I would drink again, whether I wanted to or not. I knew I would drink again. I drank whether I wanted to or not. I drank whether it was a good day or a bad day. It's the only way I know how to function, and I'm not functioning well. But it feels like my belief is that alcohol is the only thing that keeps me from just flying off in every direction, from imploding. It feels like it is the only thing that holds me together. And I asked God for help, and I made a decision that I would go to a meeting. Because when you're in jail, meetings don't seem that bad. My only problem was they let me out. And when they let me out, that brain kicked back in. You know, I started trying to go to the group, but then I started trying to imagine what life was going to be like sober. And one day turned into 2, and 2 days turned into 3, and 10 days later, I'm still circling the group. I know when your meetings are. I mean, I don't know why we write down the schedules, because you can just sit outside and go, here come the people with styrofoam cups. Here go the people with the styrofoam cups. Here come the people with the styrofoam cups. One day I was trying to go to a meeting, and I got close. I accidentally wound up there at meeting time. And y'all were going in with your styrofoam cups. And I opened up the car door, and then suddenly the thought, wait a minute, I don't have an AA book. I can't be rolling on up in here at the AA meeting without an AA book. I should go find an AA book. So, y'all, I left the place where the AA books live. I should probably start with this story. I could cut down on 45 minutes of my talk if I just started with, I left AA to go find a book. I left the place where the AA books to go on a magical quest to find an AA book. I went to the Barnes & Noble. They got them there. Only problem is they're expensive. This was back in 1992, and they were probably $6. And, you're not looking at Melania Trump here. So I left the Barnes & Noble without a book to go to the half-price books because I'm a thrifty girl. The problem with the books, they got them there too. The problem with the books is the half-price books is they got a highlighting in them. And I don't need your willy-nilly highlighting influencing my opinions about Alcoholics Anonymous. So I had to go to 3 different half-price. This quest takes me days, by the way. And finally, I find a clean copy of Alcoholics Anonymous. So I got to read the book before I can go to my first meeting. So I'm reading the book by myself, and that's when I got drunk. So I'm thinking about going to AA, and I knew the people there were really nice, and I knew they were very helpful. And my problem was I wasn't sure that I was sold on this idea of not drinking, because I had been not drinking this whole 6 days or something, and it wasn't going good. I was sweating a lot, and it was an uncomfortable time. And I started thinking about this guy I knew, Jimmy, who had 8 DWIs, and he was still drinking in a bar. And I thought, why would I bother these nice people in AA if I know a man with a solution? So I'm going to go talk to my legal advisor, Jimmy, see what he's got going on. If the Jimmy plan won't work, AA will become my plan. But for right now, AA is plan BB. I got to go talk to Jimmy, my legal advisor. So I went back to my home bar right around happy hour time. I don't know why they call that happy hour. Ain't nobody happy up in there. But I go back to my home bar, and there's Jimmy on his bar stool getting drunk. 8 DWIs. My attorney tells me I'm going to do a year in jail. Jimmy is at the bar. So I sit down across from what I think is the worst drunk I know. I've met some worse ones since. And this guy says, oh, Jen, honey, I can afford to be the kind of drunk I am. You can't afford to be the kind of drunk you are. Now, I can't pass college algebra, but I can do basic math. I got 3 DWIs. He's got 8 DWIs, and he's talking down at me a little bit. And when the worst drunk you know is talking down at you a little bit, you are having a real bad day. And something starts, like rage starts just bubbling up inside of me. Because I'm thinking, how dare you? And yet there's this little tiny voice inside of me that isn't me. And it just says, who would know better than Jimmy? Jimmy knows how you think. Jimmy knows how you drink. Jimmy knows how you feel. You see, Jimmy had a son that got hurt when he was a toddler. And they didn't think his son was going to live. He was in the NICU. He was in the little kid ICU. And every day Jimmy would say he was going to go to the bar, but Jimmy said that he would go to the hospital, but he had to stop at the bar first to get the courage to go to the hospital. And every day Jimmy didn't make it to the hospital. I'm not judging that man. I truly believe he suffers from the same malady we all do. I understand completely what happened to Jimmy every day. But this is the guy who's carrying a message to me. He said, I'm going to go to prison, and I'm probably going to go for a really long time. All that's going on right now is I'm paying my attorney in cocaine, and I didn't happen to have any cocaine, so he suggested that I might need a solution. And I could hear it. The other thing, and probably the more important thing that happened that night, was that at some point there were drinks in front of me, and at some point I took them. I don't remember where they came from. I don't remember if I ordered them or somebody else did. I don't remember drinking them. I remember looking down and seeing empty glasses and knowing that I had drank them, but I don't remember anything before that. I drank against my will. And it gives me chills to this day to talk about that, because I drank knowing I shouldn't drink. I drank having made a decision that I wouldn't drink, and I drank anyway. And that is how close we can be to the next drink. That close. We can be suddenly the thought close and not even know it. And I left that bar knowing I had to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And on December 4th of 1992, I walked into a group and I sat down. I sat where the newcomer sits, as close to the door as humanly possible. I had made a deal with God that I would stay for one meeting, the whole meeting, and nothing but the meeting, but I told God a lot of stuff. So I sat as close to the door because I just never knew when that little voice in my brain was going to go, we got to go, me, and I don't want to be, excuse me, getting out of here. I promise you, the people with single digits, they know where the exits are. They know, we got to know. And so I'm sitting by that door, and everybody else is way down here in the front, and they turn out the lights, and they light the candles, and I know I'm in a cult. You just got to look around the room, and you know you're in a cult. But the good news is I got nowhere else to go. And right before they started the meeting, somebody said, hey, there's a chair over here with us. Why don't you come sit with us? And for some ungodly reason, I moved from that chair to that chair. And I truly believe that's the moment my recovery began. When I surrender my way to your way, that's the moment my recovery begins. And I sat in that circle and I listened to y'all share, and man, you are enthusiastic. You are especially when there's a noob in the room. Man, we get super excited. And sometimes we get so excited, we forget they don't know what the heck we are talking about. And the phenomenon of craving and the sponsorship and the 3 legacies and the service structure. And and the big book. I don't even have the big book. I spent 2 weeks trying to get Alcoholics Anonymous, and now you're telling me about a big book. What am I supposed to do with that? And but you're so happy. You're just and you're the most important person here. Never get tired of hearing that. Just saying. But you follow it up with, because you remind us of where we never want to be again. Hey, techie, no. I am not having a good day here. But I start to get a panic about halfway through the meeting because I'm listening for something that's going to save my life, and I don't understand what you're talking about. I know that you like me, and I know that you're kind, and I know that you care, but I don't know what you're talking about. And one of my greatest teachers began to share. He was a guy named Gene, and he had a camo fishing cap and a ZZ Top beard, and I believe that man had done some drinking. The rest of y'all look like you drank milk. But I knew Gene. Gene had overalls on. I could trust Gene, you know? And Gene said, I didn't know I was an alcoholic. Hell, I just thought I was thirsty. And it was the first thing in that meeting I heard that I could relate to. I didn't know I was an alcoholic. I just thought I was thirsty. And he followed that up with, and the more I drink, the thirstier I get, and that begins with the very first drink. And Gene solved a mystery that I'd been working on for 10 years. See, I'm a daily drinker and a daily drunk, and I go into bars and I watch guys with watches. It's not weird they got a watch. What's weird is that they do what the watch tells them. You ever say, I don't even have a watch on now. I bet that makes you twitch. They'll have one drink, maybe two, a kamikaze on their birthday. Oh, look at the time. Got to go. Mama's got dinner waiting on me. Why would you do that? We have pretzels here. Why would you do that? Some other mook would have one drink, maybe two. Oh, look at the time. Game's about to start. I'm like, that's when I turn into the flight attendant. We got TVs here. Why would you do that? But over the course of months or weeks or years, my question changed from why would you do that to how do you do that? Because I can't do that, and I don't know why. And Gene explained it so simply. The more I drink, the thirstier I get. It begins with the very first drink. Nothing is quenched with alcohol. It only sets me more on fire. And thus I will drink more than I should every single time I drink because it sets off what we call the phenomenon of craving. Gene went on to explain that what happened to him, which is what has happened to me, is that he got a spiritual advisor called a sponsor. And that spiritual advisor taught him how to apply 12 principles to his life. He developed a relationship with a higher power whom he chose to call God because that's what we like to call him. Some of us call him other stuff. I met a girl who had a god named Sprinkles. And sounded a lot like the guy I know, so I'm not arguing. We got nicknames up in here. But he said once he developed that relationship with that higher power, he said he hadn't been thirsty in a real long time. And I wanted what that man had. And without realizing it, I was willing to go to any lengths to get it. That night, at the end of the meeting, they asked me if I'd like to share, and I haven't shut up since, which is probably making you nervous. It seemed like everybody in my meeting was an ANDA, and so I thought you had to be an ANDA, and I didn't think I was an ANDA. I mean, I had done some other stuff, but I only knew of one other 12-step program, and I didn't believe I belonged in that one because at one point in my drinking, a DEA agent showed up at my apartment and told me he knew who I was and what I had been doing and who I was hanging with, and if I continued to do that, I would go to prison with them. And I was clean in 24 hours. I did not need a sponsor. I did not need an inventory. I never sat in a circle or nothing. Put on 100 pounds in about 24 hours. It was really impressive. Slowed me way down. Can you imagine me on speed? Anyway. Dang. But that was something. I'm glad I wasn't really there for it. But anyhow, so I didn't think I was one of those. So when I introduced myself, I really did think you had to be an ANDA. So I said, my name is Jennifer, and I'm an alcoholic and a thief, a whore, and a liar. I didn't know that once you said alcoholic, you pretty much got the rest of that covered. We don't really need the specifics. We'll get to that later, But I told him a little bit about how I'd been dying one day at a time, and I told him some of the things I was ashamed of. And I told him the thing I was most ashamed of was that I knew I could never get or stay sober by myself. And those tacky people smiled and nodded. I thought they should at least weep with me. Oh, she's got it too. You know, I really did. I thought we were going to sit around and count the days and sing hymns and maybe drink a little broth and... How long you been sober, Frank? 409,042. Good for you, just as I am. Turn to page 27. I've been to a couple of groups like that. For the most part, y'all are like fun and super stoked about sobriety. And After the meeting, they gave me hugs and a chip and a phone list. And I used to say they invited me to go to Denny's. I now know they told me to go to Denny's. You do not ask a noob to do anything because there's a lot of voices in here and we don't know what you're going to do to us, you know. So if you say, would you like to go to Denny's? I'll probably, yeah, well, I mean, you know, I've got the board meeting in the morning and so they told me to go to Denny's because I went. And it's one of the few things I remember as distinctly that night, except for what Jean said, was on the way to Denny's, I thought, well, this must be where you fill out the paperwork. And so I went to Denny's to fill out the paperwork to join Alcoholics Anonymous. And I did not get my paperwork that night, but I do think it was AA orientation because I learned some stuff about you up in that Denny's. You laugh at things that are not funny. You share things you should not share, especially not in public. And I don't know why they call us anonymous, because you have no volume control. And you say stuff like, isn't that just like an alcoholic? Are you kidding me? I'm under the menu singing Kumbaya like, oh my God. I was the almost homecoming queen in this town. What am I doing? I didn't know that if you're at Denny's at 2 in the morning, you're either a member of AA or a future member of AA. Or if you're in Texas, you're a square dancer. For some reason, those people are out late. But what I saw then is what I saw tonight. There exists a fellowship and a friendliness and an understanding that is indescribably wonderful. And it was so enticing that I went home and I said a prayer to a God that I knew had given up on me completely. And I asked for help. And I woke up and I said a prayer to a God that I knew was deeply and profoundly disappointed in me. And I asked him to keep me sober. And I showed up at the next meeting I could get to right after work, and I walked in the door, and a man named Danny came up to me, and he said, hey, is your name Jennifer? And I said, why? What have you heard? And he said, are you Jennifer? And I said, yes. And he said, did you drink today? And I said, no, I didn't. And he said, welcome to your second day of sobriety. And he set the hook. And the big deal was not that he knew it was my second day of sobriety. The big deal was he knew my name. And that man helped me stay sober through my first year of sobriety. He sat with me after every meeting. See, I'd start to leave because I didn't know what to do. We just watch and see what everybody does, you know, and I didn't have anywhere to go, but y'all would get up and you'd leave. You get your purses and your keys and you walk around and you laugh, talk, and I had to get a purse. And I'd get my keys and I'd wander around and I'd kind of listen to y'all because I didn't know very many of you. But when I would put my hand on the doorknob, Danny would go, hey, where are you going? I go, you know, and the Jeopardy music would start playing in my head because I don't know where I'm going. I just see everybody leaving. And when I didn't have an answer, he'd say, are you in a big hurry to get there? No. He'd say, sit down. And he'd sit down and he'd just pat me. And we'd talk. And then the next meeting would start. And then we'd repeat it. And I'd grab a key. And I'd head towards the door, and when my hand hit the doorknob, Danny'd say, where are you going? I don't know. And I'd sit down, and he'd pat me right where he's supposed to be, and we'd talk in between meetings. And after the last meeting, I thought I had him, only he'd do the same thing. And we'd sit down. And night after night, day after day, I had a sponsor, and it was a woman, and she began to take me through the steps she knew how to do. She didn't know how to do all of them, and that's okay. She told the truth when we got past. But Danny was the one who hung out with me. And he was so gentle, and he was so kind. As a matter of fact, he made my inventory for not 13th stepping me. But He was so good to me that I didn't know he was helping me. I just thought he had nothing better to do. And shame on me that there are times that I think I have something better to do. But that man always waited until I said, it's late, I got to get home. I'll see you tomorrow, Danny. And he was always there. And I used to love telling this part of my story, but you know what? Danny's drinking himself to death right now. And I would do anything to be able to welcome that man to his second day of sobriety. I am here because he was there. But you know what? When they go back out, they leave the flashlight with us. And it is my job to look for the twitchy newcomer and say, sit down. Come sit with me. You in a hurry? You got to be somewhere? And they don't. And we talk. More importantly, I listen. And I did that for 10 years, and I worked with anybody who would work with me, and I went through the steps over and over and over again, and my life got good. I fell in love with a man I met in high school, and he's the sweetest man I've ever met. And he got the AA seal of approval, and that's when I married him. I introduced him to my friends because I no longer trusted my own judgment. But one of my best AA buddies met him, and he doesn't talk much. Surprise. And he'd tell you he doesn't have the opportunity. But I said, what do you think of him? And my buddy said, oh, he's just what we wanted for you. He's precious. And I said, how do you know he doesn't talk? And he said, because he looks at you like we look at you. And I knew you loved me, so I married him. And my life got good, and it got busy, and it got full, and these blessings started showing up. And here's where I really want to stop my story, and I'm sure it's where you want me to stop my story, but there's an important part I have to tell. Something happened between me and a sponsor that I'd had for a very long time. Today I can tell you that I think it was an honest mistake, but I brought a problem to her, and she invited someone else into the problem, and somebody that I was talking about, that I was really concerned about an exchange we had had, and she shared that information with him without talking to me first. Today I believe it was just a misunderstanding. I don't believe there was any malice behind it. I think it was a knee-jerk thing that she decided to do, but I know that I felt really betrayed. Only I never said a word. I just put that in that metal box. I thought I'd gotten rid of that metal box, but I hadn't. I put it in that metal box, and I turned the key, and I mushed it way down. Because my life was good, and I was really happy. And it wasn't that big a deal. And I was just going to set that aside. I'd pray my way through it. Something would happen. It was just going to dissipate all on its own. And it happened so slowly that I hardly noticed it was happening. You see, I just slowly stopped calling her as much. And I didn't bring her the big stuff anymore. And for the most part, things were really good. And I was sponsoring a lot of ladies, and I was really busy. And then some things sort of got sideways with me and some of the women I sponsor. A couple of them have problems other than alcoholism. And one of the symptoms of this disorder is that when they are not balanced, they can become really angry and really violent and aggressive. And it began to happen, only I didn't recognize that it was a part of their other illness. And the person that I would normally talk to, I wasn't talking to, and I became afraid of how angry and hurt and how much these women were blaming me for the condition of their life. And it was really subtle. Like I just sort of slowly backed away to fewer and fewer meetings. And I started kind of running out right after the Lord's Prayer. I mean, I stay for the Lord's Prayer. I'm grown. But I didn't hang out after because I was afraid somebody would ask me to sponsor them. And it happened so slowly and so gradually. And but I was doing this stuff, so in a weekend I'm going to 6 meetings. Close enough. And on Friday nights I'd do my funny little Friday night talk, and it was fun. It was fun. I'd sit on the front row, and it was awesome. And then the Saturday night speaker would start talking. And inevitably, sometime during that weekend, somebody would say, and here's what I heard. It's not exactly how it went down. a woman would stand at the podium and she'd be beautiful. And she would say, right at the end of her talk, every Tuesday night, me and the ladies that sponsor in Alcoholics Anonymous, they meet at my home and we read the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous. And we are rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence. And the back of my neck would get hot and my ears would get warm. They're getting warm right now. And I would think, oh, Trixie needs to sit down. Her homegirl need to wrap it up. And because she's getting all up in my hula hoop right now. And all I can think is, my sponsor used to do that, and I used to do that with the women I sponsor, and I really should. I really should do that. I would stop feeling so god-awful uncomfortable in my own skin if I would just start doing that again. And I say, I'm going to go home and think about it. And that's what I would do. I went home and thought about it till the next conference. And I'd get up there, and I'd give my funny little Friday night talk, and I'd sit on the front row, and here it comes. And me and the fella that I sponsor, we go to the lake, and we read the preface to Ford, the doctor's opinion. We read all the way to AA number 3, and let me tell you what happens to my fellers when we do it. And I would think, we're having an ice cream social. That thing's getting soft. Jim Bob, you're going to need to wrap that up because I am not loving what you're talking about because it's all up in my hula hoop, and I'm going to have to go home and think about it. Y'all, I went home and thought about it for 2 years, and it is by the grace of God that I am sober today because I was skating on real thin ice, and I was too arrogant to admit it to anybody but myself. And what happened was I had these sponsees-ish. I mean, they were sponsees light because it's really hard to hold somebody very accountable when you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And what would happen is these little girls were going to meetings, so they'd get sponsees, which was annoying. And then they would call me and they would say, hey, I got a new sponsor. Her name is Sunburst. And Sunburst is on step 1. What should we do for step 1? And I'd say, do what I did with you. What do we do? I said, well, you read the book. Which part? Start with the doctor's opinion. What page is it on? Okay, sit still. And I would, whatever. I'd turn into Kermit the Frog and type something off and send it to her and do this. And a week, maybe 10 days later, she'd call and hey, Spons, Sunburst is on step 2. What do we do with step 2? And I'd say, well, you read the book. Which part? Oh, for the love of God, come on. And I'd tell her what to read, Kermit the Frog it, send her the thing, do that. And next week, here she comes. Hey, Sunburst is doing so good. Now she's on step. It's a prayer. It is a prayer. It's in the book. I know it's on this side. Come on. Do you know what page it's on? And so I'm angry. I'm not humble. I'm angry. I'm frustrated. I can't even believe this woman who never calls me for anything suddenly is calling me all the time when she's got Sunburst. And names have been changed to protect the innocent. And out of anger, I said, you know what I'm thinking about doing? I'm thinking about having a step study. Maybe we should just have a step study. And she says, yes, do that. Yes, that would be great. And I said, settle down there. I said, I got to work out the logistics. I'll let you know. You know what she did? She did not wait on me to work out the logistics. I am not really a logistics kind of girl. I drive a car with one door handle. But that's painted in chalkboard paint. Anyway, she went and told 3 other women I sponsored, Jennifer's starting a step study. You should come. And so they start calling me, asking about this step study, and which I am unprepared to do. And so we start a step study, and it's on Monday nights at 7:30. It's at the Starbucks at the corner of Spring Creek and Coit, because I'm not inviting those freaks to my house. I mean, it's not like I'm going to dust. And I create this step study, which is just pretty much, it's out of the 12 and 12. I don't give them any homework because I know they're not going to do it. It's so, it's low and over the plate. It is so flaky. It's just like, it's one step above a word search, okay? And that's what our step study is going to be. And we're going to meet and read a chapter in the 12 and 12, and then they're going to answer these little baby questions, and they're going to look up vocabulary words because I don't really have an hour's worth of stuff to do with them. And I show up that first week, and they're sitting in the chairs outside the Starbucks, and they've got brand new 12 and 12s in highlighters. And we begin to start the meeting, and one of the girls stops me and says, "Hey, aren't we going to pray?" And we hold hands, and we say a prayer outside the Starburst. Let's make that the Starbucks. And they took it seriously, and my life began to change. They took it seriously, and my life began to change. And each week, I got a little more in depth and a little more in depth, and I began to remember what my teachers had taught me. When I got to the third step in Alcoholics Anonymous, I said the prayer with a sponsor, and then I would call her with my problems, and she'd say, "What are you doing?" I'd say, "What are you talking about?" Are you trying to line up your ducks? Are you trying to get your ducks in a row?" And I'd say, "Yes, ma'am, I would really like my ducks in a row. And she would say, "You don't have any ducks. You gave your ducks to God in the third step." Next time I saw that sponsor, she gave me a little rubber duck. Wait for it. And she said, "This is your one duck. It is your recovery duck. And if you'll take care of this one duck, all the other ducks will wind up wherever the hell they're supposed to be." And so I gave them all ducks. And they became my duckies, and every day they would send little messages of how they were taking care of their duck today. And they took it seriously, and my life began to change. We got to the end of the 12 and 12, and they wanted to do more. And I said, "We can do the big book, but we're going to work the steps together." And they took it seriously, and my life began to change. I got a new sponsor. I got active in my home group. I got these women. And, man, they don't stay. We get to 4, and, woo, the twitch comes back. People get busy. I'm just telling you. I'm so sorry. I just started a new class in college, which I signed up to when I saw we were getting close to 4. And they got to go. We went from 15 down to 5. But those 5 do a written 10-step every day together. They are accountable not only to me and not only to God, but to each other. And I am watching lives change. You see, they took it seriously, and my life began to change. So if you're new or you feel like you're new, sit down with a new drunk and read the doctor's opinion out loud. It says each day recovery begins with one alcoholic talking to another. They don't tell us which one it begins for. All I know is I'm still here. I tried to do the math and figure out how many times I've read the doctor's opinion with women, and I don't know. I know it's over 1,000 times. I don't know where most of those women are, but I know where I am. I know who I am, I know what I am, and I know whose I am. And I am so thankful for the amazing grace that I find in these rooms. God's amazing grace that I read in this text. Last story, 3 little kids. They're coloring at school, and they're really busy, and the teacher comes by and says, "Oh, what are you drawing?" Little girl says, "I'm drawing flowers. They're beautiful." And the teacher said, "They are beautiful. I love the colors you've chosen." And she goes up to little boy, and he's working hard, and she says, "What are you drawing?" He says, "I'm drawing a big old truck." I said, "I like that big old truck. Those are very large tires." "Thank you." Comes over to the little girl's desk, and she is sweating, man. She's got all the crayons all in one place. And she says, "What are you doing? What are you drawing?" She said, "I'm drawing God." And the teacher said, "Oh, nobody knows what God looks like." And she said, "Well, hang on a minute." And all I'm saying is I don't have to wonder what God looks like. God looks like one drunk helping another drunk by sharing experience, strength, and hope. God looks like the transformation that's taken place in this room. And God looks like the love we're going to carry out there. I'm glad to be here. It's a good day to be sober.
We hope you enjoyed this recording. If you are interested in other speaker tapes or CDs from AA or Al-Anon, please contact us at Sound Solutions, toll free 1-877-893-2777, or visit us on the web at soundsolutionsrecording.com. We are also available to cover your recording and sound system needs. Thank you for allowing us to be of service and carrying the message.